The girl was dying in front of 200 people, and not one of them moved. Ethan Cole wasn't supposed to be there. Just another contract worker fixing broken wiring in a building that didn't know his name. But when Maya Sinclair hit the marble floor, gasping like a fish out of water, he didn't think about protocols or permissions or the fact that men like him didn't touch people like her. He thought about his son. He thought about what happens when nobody acts. And he ran toward the girl while everyone else ran away. What came next would cost him everything, or give him everything. Either way, there was no going back. If you want to see how far Ethan's choice takes him, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in the basement mechanical room hummed like angry wasps. Ethan Cole wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his wrist, leaving a smudge of grease across his temple. The junction box in front of him was a mess. 30-year-old wiring wrapped around newer installations like vines choking a fence. Whoever had done the last retrofit hadn't bothered to label anything, and now it was Ethan's problem. Dad would have hated this, he muttered to himself, thinking of his father's meticulous approach to electrical work. Every wire labeled, every connection tested twice. Samuel Cole had been old school in the best way, the kind of tradesman who took pride in work nobody would ever see. Ethan checked his watch. 11:47 a.m. He had 13 minutes before he needed to be upstairs to verify the panel replacement on the 14th floor. The Voss Meridian Tower didn't operate on tradesman time. It operated on executive time, which meant being early was being on time, and being on time was being late. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Probably another text from Lucas's school about the field trip permission slip he'd forgotten to sign. Again. Being a single father meant living in a permanent state of almost keeping up, where every small victory was followed immediately by something you'd missed. The phone buzzed again. Jesus, Ethan muttered, yanking it out. But it wasn't the school, it was Marcus, his site supervisor. Need you lobby level. Now. Issue with the main lighting circuit. Ethan stared at the message, then at the half-finished junction box. He'd need at least another 20 minutes to do this properly. But Marcus didn't send texts like that unless something was actually wrong. He grabbed his tool bag and headed for the service elevator, leaving the panel open. He'd come back. He always came back. The elevator rose through the building's concrete spine, and Ethan watched the floor numbers tick upward on the small display. Basement. Ground. Mezzanine. The Voss Meridian Tower was one of those buildings that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought geometry was a personality trait, all sharp angles and reflective glass. The kind of place where people paid $12 for coffee and acted like it was reasonable. Ethan had been working here for 3 weeks, part of a 6-month contract to overhaul the building's aging electrical infrastructure. It was good money, better than most of the jobs he'd landed in the past year, but it came with the usual bullshit. Security badges that only worked half the time, supervisors who treated contract workers like furniture, staff who looked through him like he was invisible. The elevator doors opened onto the lobby, and Ethan stepped into a different world. The ground floor of Voss Meridian was designed to intimidate. 30-foot ceilings, white marble floors polished to a mirror shine, abstract sculptures that probably cost more than Ethan's truck. A massive digital display wrapped around 3 walls, cycling through stock tickers and promotional videos for companies Ethan had never heard of. Everything about the space screamed money and power, and you don't belong here. Marcus was waiting near the reception desk, a stocky man in his 50s with permanent frown lines and a clipboard that never left his hand. He spotted Ethan and waved him over with the kind of urgency that suggested this problem was about to become Ethan's fault. "What have we got?" Ethan asked, setting his tool bag down. "Main circuit for the east lobby, flickering like a damn disco. Building manager's pissed because some big meeting's happening today, and they don't want it looking like we're running this place on generators." Ethan glanced up at the lights. They looked fine now, but he knew how these things went. Intermittent problems were always the worst. Show up when you're not looking, disappear when you are. "I'll check the distribution panel," Ethan said. "Probably a loose neutral or a failing breaker." "Make it fast," Marcus said, "and don't talk to anyone. Security's twitchy today." Ethan didn't ask why. Security was always twitchy in buildings like this. He hoisted his tool bag and moved toward the service corridor that would take him to the electrical room, weaving through clusters of well-dressed people who didn't notice him. That's when he heard it. Not a sound, exactly. More like the absence of sound. A sudden pocket of silence in the middle of the lobby's ambient noise. Conversations cutting off, footsteps stopping. Ethan had learned to trust that silence. It was the same silence that happened right before someone got hurt on a job site, right before something went wrong. He turned around. A girl was on the floor. She couldn't have been more than 16, maybe 17. Dark hair, school uniform, backpack still on her shoulders. She'd gone down hard. Ethan could see the red mark blooming on her cheekbone where her face had hit the marble. But that wasn't what made him move. It was the way she was breathing, short, shallow gasps. Her chest heaving like she'd just run a marathon, but her lips were turning blue. Her hands clawed at her throat in that universal gesture of "I can't breathe," and her eyes were wide with the kind of panic that meant her body was shutting down. People had formed a loose circle around her, close enough to look concerned, far enough to avoid responsibility. Someone was on their phone, probably calling for help. A woman in a business suit knelt beside the girl, but clearly had no idea what to do. Ethan dropped his tool bag and ran. He didn't think about protocols. Didn't think about whether he was allowed to touch her, whether he was qualified, whether it was his place. He thought about Lucas, 8 years old, and what he'd want someone to do if Lucas was the one on the floor. Ethan shoved through the circle and dropped to his knees beside the girl. Up close, it was worse. Her breathing was barely there now, more like a whistle than actual air movement. Her skin had a grayish tint that meant her oxygen levels were tanking. "Asthma attack," he said, loud enough for anyone listening. "Does she have an inhaler?" The woman in the business suit just stared at him. I don't know." "Check her bag." The girl's hands were still at her throat, her whole body rigid with the effort of trying to breathe. Ethan grabbed her backpack and yanked it off, ignoring the way her arms flopped limply. He dumped the contents onto the marble. Textbooks, pens, a water bottle, crumpled receipts, a phone with a cracked screen. No inhaler. "Shit," Ethan muttered. He looked up at the crowd. "Does anyone have an inhaler? Anyone?" Blank faces. Expensive suits. Nobody moved. The girl's eyes were starting to roll back. Ethan made a decision. He tilted her head back, opening her airway as much as possible. Her breathing didn't improve. He'd seen this before. Not often, but enough to know what it meant. Her airways were too constricted. She needed medication, needed it 5 minutes ago, and if she didn't get it soon, she was going to stop breathing altogether. "Call 911, he shouted at no one in particular. Then to the girl, quieter. Hey, look at me. You're going to be okay. Stay with me." Her eyes found his, terrified, pleading. Ethan looked around, desperate now. The lobby had gone completely silent, except for the girl's failing breaths. 200 people, and nobody knew what to do. Then he saw it. Across the lobby, maybe 40 feet away. A red first aid station mounted on the wall next to the elevators. Buildings like this always had them. Fancy corporate liability insurance translated into fiberglass boxes and regulation supplies. Ethan looked at the girl, looked at the first aid station, did the math. 10 seconds there, 10 seconds back. 20 seconds total. Could she last 20 seconds? Did he have a choice? He stood up and ran. Behind him, someone yelled, Sir, you can't." Ethan ignored them. His boots slapped against the marble, loud in the unnatural quiet. He reached the first aid station and ripped it open, shoving aside bandages and antiseptic wipes and useless bullshit until his hand closed around what he needed. An emergency inhaler. The kind designed for situations exactly like this. He sprinted back, sliding to his knees beside the girl so hard he felt the impact in his kneecaps. Her breathing had deteriorated even more, barely a whisper now, her chest barely moving. "Come on," Ethan said, shaking the inhaler. "Come on, stay with me." He tilted her head back again, brought the inhaler to her lips, and pressed. Once. The medication released in a soft hiss. He waited 3 seconds, pressed again. Her body jerked slightly, some autonomic response to the albuterol hitting her system. "Breathe," Ethan said. "Come on, breathe." For 5 terrible seconds, nothing happened. Then the girl gasped, a real gasp this time, ragged and desperate but real. Air moving, oxygen getting through. Ethan nearly collapsed with relief. There you go, keep breathing, you're okay." The girl's chest rose and fell, still labored but no longer dying. Color started creeping back into her face. the grayish tint fading to pale pink. Her eyes focused on Ethan's face, still panicked, but no longer vacant. "Slow breaths," Ethan said, his voice steady even though his hands were shaking. "Nice and slow. You're okay. Help's coming." As if summoned, he heard sirens in the distance. Someone had actually called 911. The girl kept breathing, each breath a little easier than the last, and Ethan stayed with her, one hand on her shoulder, keeping her grounded. That's when he noticed the man. Tall, maybe 50, in a suit that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. He was standing at the edge of the circle that had formed around them, staring down at Ethan with an expression that wasn't gratitude or relief or anything close to it. It was fury. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" the man said. Ethan blinked. "I'm sorry? Do you have medical training? Are you certified to administer aid?" "She was dying." "That's not what I asked." The man stepped closer, and Ethan saw the badge clipped to his belt. Executive credentials, Daniel Voss, Vice President of Operations. "You violated building security protocols by accessing emergency equipment without authorization. You made physical contact with a minor without guardian consent. I saved her life," Ethan said, his voice flat. Voss's face darkened. "That remains to be seen." Two security guards appeared, flanking Voss like bookends. They were both staring at Ethan now, and he realized with a sinking feeling that this wasn't over. The paramedics arrived a moment later, moving efficiently through the crowd with a stretcher and medical bags. Ethan stepped back, giving them room. They took over immediately, checking vitals, asking questions the girl couldn't answer yet, loading her onto the stretcher with practiced ease. One of the paramedics glanced at Ethan. "You administer the inhaler?" "Yeah." "Good call. She was in bad shape." The validation should have felt good. It didn't, because Voss was still standing there, and the security guards hadn't moved. "Sir," one of them said to Ethan, "we're going to need you to come with us." Ethan stared at him. "You're kidding." "Building policy. Any incident involving emergency medical response requires a full security review." "A security review," Ethan repeated. "I just saved that girl's life, and you want to do a security review?" "Sir, please don't make this difficult." Ethan looked at the girl being wheeled away, still conscious, still breathing. Then he looked at Marcus, who was standing off to the side with an expression that said, "I told you not to talk to anyone." "Fine," Ethan said. "Let's get this over with." The security office was on the second floor, accessible only by a keycard elevator that took them past the lobby and into the building's administrative core. Ethan had never been up here before. Contract workers didn't get access to anything above the mechanical spaces. Everything was gray and white and aggressively corporate, all straight lines and frosted glass. They put him in a conference room with no windows and told him to wait. Ethan sat in one of the ergonomic chairs and tried not to think about the junction box he'd left open in the basement, or the fact that Lucas got out of school in 4 hours and Ethan had promised to pick him up on time for once. He checked his phone. No signal. The building probably had some kind of interference shielding up here, another layer of security to keep the important people safe from the outside world. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Finally, the door opened. Daniel Voss walked in, followed by a woman Ethan didn't recognize, mid-40s, sharp suit, the kind of neutral expression that suggested she'd been through this exact scenario 100 times before. She was carrying a tablet. "Mr. Cole," she said, not offering her hand. "I'm Patricia Nguyen, head of legal and compliance for Voss Meridian. I need to ask you some questions about the incident in the lobby." "Incident," Ethan said. "That's what we're calling it?" Nguyen sat down across from him, Voss taking the chair beside her. "Can you walk me through exactly what happened, from your perspective?" Ethan did. He kept it factual, no editorializing, just the sequence of events. Girl collapses. He responds. Administers inhaler. Paramedics arrive. The whole thing took maybe 3 minutes from start to finish. Nguyen typed notes on her tablet the entire time, her face unreadable. When Ethan finished, she looked up. "And you accessed the emergency medical supplies without authorization from building management or security personnel?" There wasn't time to ask permission. "Do you have medical training, EMT certification, first aid credentials?" "No, but I know what an asthma attack looks like, and I know how to use an inhaler." "That's not the same as being qualified to administer emergency medical aid." Ethan leaned forward. So what was I supposed to do? Let her die while I filled out a form? Voss spoke for the first time since entering the room. You were supposed to wait for qualified medical personnel. We have protocols for situations like this. Your protocols would have killed her. That's speculation. It's fact, Ethan shot back. She had maybe a minute left before her airways closed completely. The paramedics didn't get there for another 5. Do the math. Wayne held up a hand. Mr. Cole, I understand you believe you acted in good faith, but from a liability standpoint, what you did exposes this company to significant risk. If something had gone wrong, if you'd made her condition worse or caused additional injury, Voss Meridian could be held responsible. But I didn't make it worse. I saved her. That's not the point. Ethan stared at her, something cold settling in his chest. Then what is the point? Wynne exchanged a glance with Voss. We're going to need to review the security footage before making any decisions about next steps. In the meantime, your site access is suspended pending the outcome of this investigation. Suspended, Ethan said. You're suspending me for saving someone's life. We're suspending you for violating building security protocols, Voss corrected. There's a difference. Ethan stood up. Is there? Nobody answered. No. They escorted him out through a side exit like he was some kind of criminal. Marcus met him in the loading area, looking equal parts pissed and sympathetic. They're really doing this? Marcus asked. Yeah. That's bullshit, man. You did the right thing. Apparently that doesn't matter. Marcus sighed, rubbing his face. Look, I'll talk to the union rep, see if we can file a grievance or something. But you know how these corporate places are. They'd rather protect their asses than admit someone did something good. Ethan nodded. He wasn't even angry anymore, just tired. Tired of fighting, tired of being invisible, tired of living in a world where doing the right thing got you punished instead of thanked. He drove home in his truck, an old Ford Ranger with 200,000 miles and a check engine light that had been on for so long he'd stopped noticing it. The city scrolled past his windows, traffic, billboards, people living their lives without any idea that a girl almost died today and nobody cared. Lucas was at aftercare when Ethan got there, playing basketball with 2 other kids in the small gymnasium. He saw Ethan and immediately broke into a run, crashing into him with the full-body enthusiasm of an 8-year-old who hadn't seen his dad in 8 hours. Dad, you're early! Yeah, buddy. Finished up early today. Can we get pizza? Ethan thought about his bank account, about the suspended paycheck that wasn't coming now, about the bills due next week. Sure. Why not? They went to the place down the street, the one with the torn vinyl booths and the jukebox that only played songs from the 80s. Lucas ordered pepperoni and told Ethan about his day, something about a science project involving volcanoes, and how his friend Tyler said girls couldn't be scientists, but Miss Roberts said that was dumb because Marie Curie existed. Ethan listened, made the appropriate responses, and tried not to think about the fact that he might have just lost the best-paying job he'd had in a year because he'd saved someone's life. When they got home, Lucas went straight to his room to work on homework, and Ethan collapsed on the couch. Their apartment was small. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in, a living room that doubled as Ethan's office. The furniture was all second-hand, scavenged from Craigslist and yard sales, but it was theirs. Ethan had made it a home, as best he could, in the 3 years since Emma died. His phone buzzed. Marcus. Union rep says they can't do much. Companies within rights to suspend pending investigation. Sorry, man. Ethan stared at the message until the screen went dark. Mug. 3 days passed. Ethan spent them fixing things around the apartment, leaky faucet in the bathroom, loose hinge on Lucas's bedroom door, the outlet in the kitchen that sometimes sparked. Busy work. The kind of thing that kept his hands occupied and his mind empty. On the 4th day, his phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Mr. Cole? This is Patricia Nguyen from Voss Meridian. We've completed our review of the incident. I'd like to invite you to come in and discuss our findings. Ethan's stomach tightened. When? Tomorrow, if possible. 10 a.m. I'll be there. He hung up and sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. Ciao. The security guard at the front desk barely looked at him when he signed in. They gave him a visitor badge, not his old contractor credentials, but the kind they gave to people who didn't belong, and directed him to the elevator. Patricia Nguyen was waiting in the same conference room, but this time she wasn't alone. Beside her sat a man Ethan didn't recognize, early 60s, silver hair, expensive suit that made Voss's look cheap. He had the kind of presence that said, "I own this room," and when he looked at Ethan, his gaze was sharp and assessing. "Mr. Cole," Nguyen said, "thank you for coming. This is Richard Sinclair." The name meant nothing to Ethan. "Okay." Sinclair stood and offered his hand. His grip was firm, controlled. "My daughter is alive because of you." The words took a second to land. "Your daughter, the girl from the lobby." "Maya." "Yes." Sinclair sat back down, and Ethan noticed for the first time that the man's eyes were tired, ringed with the kind of shadows that came from not sleeping. "The doctors told me she had less than a minute before her airways would have closed completely. If you hadn't acted when you did." He didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. Ethan sat down slowly. "How is she?" "Home. Resting. She wants to thank you herself, but I told her to wait until she's fully recovered." Sinclair leaned forward. "Mr. Cole, I've spent the past 4 days reviewing what happened in that lobby. I've watched the security footage. I've spoken to witnesses. I've consulted with the paramedics who treated Maya." "Okay," Ethan said, wary now. "Everyone froze," Sinclair said. 200 people in that lobby, including trained security personnel, medical staff from the clinic on the 7th floor, executives with 6-figure salaries and expense accounts, and not one of them moved. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. "Except you," Sinclair continued, "a contract electrician who had no reason to get involved, no obligation to risk anything. You didn't hesitate. You didn't calculate the liability or worry about the rules. You saw my daughter dying and you ran toward her." Nguyen cleared her throat. "Mr. Sinclair has requested that we revisit our initial findings regarding the incident." "Requested," Sinclair said, his tone dry, "is a polite way of saying I made it very clear that if Voss Meridian punished the man who saved my daughter's life, I would withdraw every dollar of investment I have in this building and make sure everyone in the business community knows why." Ethan blinked. "You're an investor?" "Majority shareholder, actually." Sinclair's smile was thin. "Turns out that matters to people like Daniel Voss." Nguyen looked uncomfortable. "After reviewing all the evidence, we've concluded that Mr. Cole's actions, while unorthodox, were justified under the circumstances. The suspension is being lifted, effective immediately." "And?" Sinclair prompted. Nguyen's jaw tightened. "And we'd like to offer Mr. Cole a position within Voss Meridian's operations team, head of emergency response and safety protocols. Full benefits, salary commensurate with the role." Ethan stared at her, then at Sinclair, then back at Nguyen. "You're offering me a job?" "We're offering you the opportunity to make sure what happened in that lobby never happens again," Sinclair said. "To build a system where people don't freeze, where protocols serve people instead of the other way around." He paused. "My daughter is alive because one man decided to act instead of waiting for permission. I'd like to see that become the standard, not the exception." Ethan's mind was racing. A real job. Salary, benefits, stability. The kind of thing he hadn't had since before Emma got sick. But he thought about Voss's face in the lobby, about being escorted out like a criminal, about the way Nguyen had said liability like it was the only thing that mattered. "I need to think about it," Ethan said. Sinclair nodded. "Fair enough. Take the time you need." He stood, and Ethan did the same. "But Mr. Cole, my daughter asked me to tell you something." "What's that?" "She said you told her she was going to be okay, even when she thought she was dying. She said you meant it." Sinclair's voice roughened slightly. "Thank you for that. For seeing her as a person, not a problem." He left the conference room, and Ethan watched him go. Nguyen stood as well, gathering her tablet. "I'll have HR send over the formal offer details. You can take up to a week to decide." "Why are you really doing this?" Ethan asked. She paused at the door. "Because Richard Sinclair asked us to." "That's not what I'm asking." Nguyen looked at him for a long moment. "Because he's right," she said finally. "Everyone froze, myself included. I was 20 feet away when Maya collapsed, and I didn't move. I told myself someone else would handle it, someone more qualified. And then I watched a man with grease on his hands and no credentials do what none of us had the courage to do." She met his eyes. "That shouldn't be exceptional. It should be expected. Maybe you can help us figure out how." She left. Ethan stood alone in the conference room, surrounded by glass and steel and corporate emptiness, and tried to figure out what the hell had just happened to his life. He picked up Lucas from school that afternoon and took him to the park, the one with the good swings and the climbing structure shaped like a pirate ship. Lucas talked the whole way there, something about a book report and how he'd picked a story about a kid who built a rocket ship out of cardboard. "That's cool, buddy," Ethan said, only half listening. They got to the park and Lucas ran straight for the swings. Ethan pushed him, higher and higher, until Lucas was shrieking with laughter and demanding to go even higher. "Dad, higher!" And Ethan thought about Maya Sinclair, gasping on that marble floor. Thought about the circle of people who'd watched her die. Thought about what kind of world it was where saving someone's life made you a liability. "Dad?" Lucas called from the swing. "You okay?" Ethan caught the swing on its backswing, bringing Lucas to a gentle stop. "Yeah, I'm okay." "You look weird." "Just thinking." "About what?" Ethan looked at his son, 8 years old, gap-toothed, fearless in the way kids are when they trust the world to catch them. He thought about the job offer, about stability, about showing Lucas that doing the right thing could actually lead somewhere good. About doing something different, Ethan said, something that matters. Lucas considered this. "Does it pay better than the electric stuff?" Ethan laughed, rough and surprised. "Yeah, it might." "Cool. Can we get ice cream?" "Sure, buddy. Why not?" They walked to the ice cream place on the corner and Ethan let Lucas order whatever he wanted. 2 scoops, chocolate, and cookie dough, in a waffle cone. They sat on the bench outside and watched people pass by, and Ethan made his decision. Not because Richard Sinclair had threatened to pull his money, not because Nguyen had offered him a better paycheck, but because somewhere in this city there was a 16-year-old girl who was alive to see tomorrow, because one person had decided that doing the right thing was more important than following the rules. And if Ethan could make that the standard instead of the exception, maybe that was worth trying. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to Nguyen. "I'll take the job." He hit send before he could second-guess himself. Lucas finished his ice cream and wiped chocolate from his face with the back of his hand. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "That girl you helped, the one at your work, is she okay?" Ethan looked at his son, at the trust and concern in those 8-year-old eyes, and felt something settle in his chest. "Yeah," he said. "She's okay." "Good." Lucas hopped off the bench. "Can we go to the climbing thing now?" "Sure." They went back to the pirate ship, and Lucas climbed to the top while Ethan watched from below, ready to catch him if he fell. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and somewhere in the city behind them, the Voss Meridian Tower reflected the light like a promise or a warning. Ethan wasn't sure which, but he'd find out. Ethan's first day in the new role started at 7:30 in the morning, which meant Lucas had to be at before care by 7, which meant Ethan had been up since 5:45 trying to find Lucas's other shoe while simultaneously making breakfast and signing the permission slip he'd forgotten about for the 3rd time that week. "It's under the couch," Lucas called from the bathroom, toothbrush hanging out of his mouth. Ethan dropped to his knees and looked. Sure enough, there was the shoe, wedged between a dust bunny the size of a tennis ball and a toy car he'd thought was lost forever. "How did you even—" Ethan started, then stopped. There was no point asking. Kids operated on a logic that defied physics. They made it to the school with 4 minutes to spare. Lucas hugged him goodbye at the door, then stopped and looked up at Ethan with that serious expression he got sometimes, the one that made him look older than 8. "You nervous?" Lucas asked. "Maybe a little." "You'll be good at it. You're good at helping people." Ethan felt something tighten in his throat. "Thanks, buddy." "Can we have spaghetti tonight?" "Yeah, we can have spaghetti." Lucas grinned and disappeared into the building, backpack bouncing against his shoulders. Ethan watched him go, then got back in the truck and drove toward a future he still wasn't sure he understood. The Voss Meridian Tower looked different in the early morning light. Less intimidating, more tired. The night cleaning crews were just finishing up, pushing industrial buffers across the marble floors, and the lobby was almost empty except for a handful of early arrivals clutching coffee cups like lifelines. Ethan checked in at the security desk. The guard, a different one from before, younger, with a name tag that read Hayes, looked at his new employee badge and then at Ethan's face. You're the guy, Hayes said. What guy? The one who saved that girl. Everyone's been talking about it. Hayes grinned. Man, Voss was pissed. I heard he spent like 2 hours arguing with Mr. Sinclair about protocols and liability and all that corporate bullshit. Ethan shifted his weight. Yeah, well, here I am. 10th floor, HR is expecting you. The elevator took him up through the building's core, and Ethan watched the numbers climb while trying to remember the last time he'd worn actual dress pants. Probably Emma's funeral. He'd paired them with one of his 2 decent button-down shirts and the boots he usually saved for job interviews, which meant he looked like exactly what he was, a tradesman playing dress-up in a world that ran on different rules. The 10th floor was all open-concept workspace and glass-walled conference rooms, the kind of design that was supposed to promote collaboration, but mostly just meant everyone could watch you work. A woman in her 30s met him at the elevator, hand extended. Mr. Cole? I'm Jennifer Park, HR. Welcome to Voss Meridian. Her handshake was professional, her smile practiced. She led him through a maze of cubicles and standing desks to a corner office that was significantly smaller than he'd expected. It had a window, at least. 10th floor meant he could see part of the city skyline, the buildings stacked against each other like dominoes waiting to fall. This is your space, Jennifer said. Your login credentials are on the desk, along with your employee handbook and benefits enrollment forms. You'll meet with Patricia Nguyen at 9 to go over your responsibilities, and then you have a building tour at 10:30. Ethan looked around. Desk, computer, filing cabinet, 2 guest chairs. It felt sterile, like a doctor's office. There's coffee in the break room, Jennifer continued. And if you need anything, just dial extension 4422. That's my direct line. Thanks. She left him alone, and Ethan sat down in the office chair, some ergonomic thing that probably cost more than his couch, and stared at the computer screen. His reflection looked back at him from the black monitor, distorted and uncertain. He logged in using the credentials on the sticky note Jennifer had left. The desktop loaded, corporate wallpaper, and a dozen program icons he didn't recognize. His email inbox was already full. Welcome messages, IT support tickets, calendar invites for meetings he didn't understand. One email stood out. The sender was listed as R. Sinclair, subject line blank. Ethan opened it. Mr. Cole, I wanted to reach out personally before your first day. What you're walking into won't be easy. There will be resistance from people who prefer systems over people, who think liability matters more than doing what's right. Don't let them wear you down. Maya is alive because you didn't ask permission to care. That's what we need here. Richard Sinclair. Ethan read it twice, then closed the email and tried to figure out what the hell he was supposed to do for the next hour and 15 minutes until his meeting with Nguyen. He ended up reading through the employee handbook, which was 73 pages of dense corporate speak about conduct policies and harassment training and the proper procedure for requesting time off. There was an entire section on emergency protocols, what to do in case of fire, active shooter, medical emergency, bomb threat, and Ethan found himself getting angrier with every paragraph. The medical emergency protocol was 4 pages long. It included 17 steps, 6 of which involved waiting for authorization from management before taking action. Step 12 said, in bold, do not administer aid unless you have current medical certification and written permission from building management. He was still staring at it when Patricia Nguyen knocked on his doorframe. Mr. Cole, ready to get started? Ethan held up the handbook, this section on medical emergencies. You know it's insane, right? Nguyen's expression didn't change. It's designed to protect the company from liability. It's designed to let people die while everyone fills out paperwork. That's one perspective. It's the right perspective. Nguyen stepped into the office and closed the door behind her. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, more careful. Mr. Cole, I'm going to be direct with you. The only reason you're sitting in this office is because Richard Sinclair has enough leverage to force certain decisions. But leverage doesn't change culture. Most of the senior leadership team views you as a liability, someone who violated protocols and got rewarded for it because a billionaire said so. Sounds about right. Which means you're going to have to prove them wrong, not with speeches or arguments, but with results. She sat down in one of the guest chairs. Your job is to redesign our emergency response systems in a way that prioritizes rapid intervention while still managing risk. You'll report directly to me, and you'll have access to building security, facilities management, and our corporate safety consultants. But make no mistake, people will be looking for reasons to discredit you. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Why are you telling me this? Because I was in that lobby too. I watched Maya Sinclair collapse, and I told myself someone else would handle it. Then I watched you run toward her without hesitating, and I realized I'd spent 15 years in corporate America learning how to avoid responsibility instead of how to take it. Nguyen's jaw tightened. I don't like that person. So if you're actually going to change something here, I'd rather help than get in your way. It was the most honest thing anyone had said to him since he'd walked into this building. Okay, Ethan said. Where do we start? Nguyen pulled out her tablet. Building audit. I want you to walk every floor, identify every potential hazard, every gap in our current protocols. Talk to security, maintenance, janitorial staff, people who actually see how this building operates day to day, not the managers who think they know. That'll take weeks. You have 6. After that, you'll present your findings and recommendations to the executive leadership team. They'll decide whether to implement your changes or bury them. Ethan thought about the junction box he'd left open 3 weeks ago, the half-finished work that had been his entire world before Maya Sinclair stopped breathing. This felt bigger, more complicated, more likely to fail. 6 weeks, he said. Got it. The building tour started on the ground floor and worked its way up. Jennifer Park led the way, pointing out conference rooms and executive suites and amenities like the coffee bar on the 3rd floor and the fitness center on the 15th. Ethan paid attention to different things: fire exits blocked by furniture, first aid stations mounted too high for most people to reach, security cameras with blind spots. On the 7th floor, they passed a medical clinic, the one Sinclair had mentioned, staffed during business hours with a nurse practitioner and basic diagnostic equipment. Ethan stopped. This was open when Maya collapsed? He asked. Jennifer checked her tablet. According to the logs, yes. The NP was with another patient at the time. How far from the lobby? Maybe 200 feet. Why? Ethan did the math. 200 feet, standard walking speed, call it 30 seconds. Add another 30 to assess the situation, another minute to retrieve medication. 2 minutes total, best case scenario. Maya would have been brain dead. Just wondering, he said. They continued the tour. By the time they reached the 20th floor, executive suites, corner offices with city views, conference rooms named after philosophical concepts, Ethan had counted 43 safety violations, most of them small but cumulative. Extension cords daisy-chained together, emergency exits that required badge access, fire extinguishers that probably hadn't been inspected in years. Daniel Voss's office was on the 21st floor. They didn't go inside, but Ethan saw him through the glass wall on a phone call, gesturing with the kind of aggressive precision that suggested whoever was on the other end was getting their ass kicked. That's Mr. Voss, Jennifer said, unnecessarily. Vice President of Operations. He oversees building management, security, and facilities. So he's my boss's boss. Technically, you report to Patricia, who reports to Mr. Voss, who reports to the executive board. But Mr. Sinclair has a seat on that board, so the hierarchy gets complicated. Politics, Ethan said. Welcome to corporate America. They finished the tour back on the 10th floor. Jennifer gave him her phone number. In case you have questions, though, honestly, most people just figure it out as they go, and left him in his office with a stack of access request forms and a building directory that was 300 pages long. Ethan spent the afternoon filling out paperwork and trying to understand the organizational structure. Voss Meridian owned the building but leased space to about 40 different companies, which meant coordinating emergency procedures across multiple tenants, each with their own policies and insurance requirements. It was a bureaucratic nightmare. At 4:30, his desk phone rang. Ethan stared at it for a second. He hadn't used a desk phone in over a decade, then picked up. Cole? Mr. Cole. This is Franklin Hayes from Lobby Security. There's a visitor here to see you, Miss Maya Sinclair. Ethan's heart did something complicated. Send her up. He met her at the elevator. She looked better than the last time he'd seen her. Color in her face, breathing easy, no panic in her eyes. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, and she was holding a coffee cup from the expensive place on the corner. Hi, she said. Hi. They stood there awkwardly for a second. Maya offered the coffee cup. I wasn't sure if you liked coffee, but my dad said everyone in an office drinks coffee, so. Ethan took it. Thanks. It's a latte with an extra shot. The barista said that's what most people get when they're stressed. Smart barista. Maya smiled, just a little. Can we talk? Ethan led her to his office. She sat in one of the guest chairs and looked around, taking in the blank walls and the generic furniture and the handbook still open on his desk. This is weird, she said. What is? You being here, in an office. My dad told me they gave you a job, but I didn't really believe it until I saw it. She paused. You don't look like you belong here. I don't. Good. The people who belong here are the ones who watched me die and didn't do anything. The bitterness in her voice surprised him. Ethan sat down across from her. How are you feeling? Physically? Fine. The doctor said I was lucky. Another minute and I would have had brain damage or worse. She twisted the hem of her sweater. But everyone keeps asking me that, how I'm feeling, if I'm okay. And I keep saying yes because that's what you're supposed to say. But honestly, I'm pissed. At me? No. At everyone else. Maya looked up, and her eyes were fierce. 200 people, Mr. Cole. My school had an assembly about what happened, and they made it sound like some kind of miracle, like the universe just happened to put the right person in the right place at the right time. But that's bullshit. You were there because you were working. Everyone else was there because they work in that building, or visit that building, or have meetings in that building. And not one of them helped me. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. My own math tutor was 10 feet away, Maya continued. She comes to the building every Monday to meet with me before school. She saw me collapse, and she just stood there. Later, she told my dad she didn't want to make things worse, didn't want to do the wrong thing, like doing nothing isn't also a choice. People freeze, Ethan said. It's a natural response to crisis. That's what everyone keeps saying, but you didn't freeze. I got lucky. I've seen asthma attacks before. I knew what to look for. That's not luck, that's knowledge, and you used it. Maya leaned forward. Do you know what the scariest part was? Not the fact that I couldn't breathe. That was terrifying, but it was also kind of abstract, like my body was doing something I couldn't control. The scariest part was looking at all those people and realizing nobody was going to help me, that I was going to die surrounded by strangers who were too afraid or too polite, or too worried about getting in trouble to do anything. Ethan thought about the circle of faces in the lobby, the blank expressions, the phones held up to record but not to call for help. And then you showed up, Maya said, her voice quieter now. And you looked at me like I mattered, like I was a person, not a problem. You told me I was going to be okay, and I believed you. I'm glad it worked out. That's it? That's all you're going to say? Ethan set down the coffee cup. What do you want me to say? I don't know. Maybe that you're angry too. That you think it's messed up that you got in trouble for saving my life. That you're going to make sure it doesn't happen to someone else. I'm working on that last part. Are you? Maya gestured at the office, at the computer and the handbook and the corporate emptiness. Or are you just going to become another person in a building full of people who know how to follow rules but not how to care? The accusation stung because part of Ethan wondered the same thing. He'd spent 3 weeks doing electrical work, hands dirty, problems concrete. Now he was in an office doing paperwork and navigating politics, and he had no idea if anything he did would actually matter. I don't know yet, Ethan said honestly. I'm trying to figure that out. Maya studied him for a long moment, then she stood up. My dad thinks you're going to change things here. He talks about you like you're some kind of hero. But I don't need a hero. I just need people to give a shit when someone's dying in front of them. She left before Ethan could respond. He sat alone in his office, surrounded by forms and policies and the weight of expectations he didn't ask for, and tried to figure out what the hell he'd gotten himself into. At 6 o'clock, he packed up his things and headed home. Lucas was with Mrs. Chen, the neighbor who watched him 3 afternoons a week, in exchange for Ethan fixing things around her apartment. When Ethan picked him up, she handed over a plate covered in foil. Leftovers, she said. Pork dumplings? Lucas helped make them. I folded 17, Lucas announced proudly. Thanks, Mrs. Chen. How was the new job? Complicated. She nodded knowingly. Office jobs always are. Too many people talking, not enough people doing. They went home and ate the dumplings while Lucas talked about his day. something involving a frog in science class, and a disagreement with Tyler about whether Batman could beat Superman in a fight. Ethan listened and made the appropriate responses, grateful for the distraction. After Lucas went to bed, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and started building a spreadsheet. 43 safety violations across 21 floors. He listed them all, categorized by severity and location, noting which ones were quick fixes and which would require budget approval. Then he started researching emergency response protocols at other corporate buildings. What he found didn't make him feel better. Most companies had the same approach: minimize liability, maximize legal protection, assume that trained professionals would always be available within a reasonable time frame. None of them accounted for the human factor: the freezing, the hesitation, the fear of getting it wrong. Ethan closed the laptop and stared at the wall. Emma's photograph was still there, the one from their wedding day, both of them young and stupid and convinced they had time. She'd died 3 years ago, pancreatic cancer, 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. Toward the end, when the pain got bad, she'd made Ethan promise 2 things: take care of Lucas, and don't stop being the kind of person who helps. "I'm trying," Ethan said to the photograph. "I just don't know if I'm doing it right." The photograph didn't answer. It never did. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "This is Patricia Nguyen. Security flagged unusual access patterns on your employee account. Building schematics, safety inspection records, past incident reports. Wanted to make sure it was actually you and not a security breach." Ethan typed back, "It's me, doing homework." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "Good. Keep doing it." "And Cole? Don't let Maya Sinclair's anger derail you. She's right to be angry. Use that." Ethan stared at the message, then set his phone down and went back to his laptop. He worked until midnight, building a database of every emergency scenario he could think of and how the current Voss Meridian protocols would handle it. Medical emergency. Fire. Active shooter. Elevator malfunction. Chemical spill. Heart attack, stroke, seizure. Allergic reaction. In almost every case, the protocol prioritized procedure over speed. Wait for authorization. Confirm credentials. Document everything. Minimize liability. And in almost every case, those delays would kill people. Ethan saved the file and closed the laptop. Tomorrow he'd start talking to the people who actually worked in the building: security guards and maintenance crews and administrative assistants. The ones who saw the problems but didn't have the authority to fix them. 6 weeks to audit a building and redesign a system that had been built over decades. 6 weeks to convince people that caring about each other was more important than covering your ass. It felt impossible. But then again, so had saving Maya Sinclair, right up until he'd done it. Ethan turned off the lights and went to bed. In the next room, Lucas was snoring softly, lost in whatever dreams 8-year-olds had. Ethan listened to the sound and thought about all the ways the world could go wrong, and all the small choices that kept it from falling apart completely. Then he closed his eyes and tried to sleep, knowing tomorrow would bring more questions he didn't have answers to, more problems he didn't know how to solve. But at least he'd be trying. That had to count for something. The morning of his second week, Ethan showed up at the building at 6:15, before most of the staff arrived, and found Franklin Hayes in the security office drinking terrible coffee from a styrofoam cup. "You're early," Hayes said, not looking up from the monitor displaying 24 camera feeds. "Need to talk to you about something." Hayes glanced at him now, eyebrows raised. "About what?" "The day Maya Sinclair collapsed. You were on duty, right?" Hayes's expression shifted, became guarded. "Yeah, why?" Ethan pulled out a folding chair and sat down. "I'm not here to blame anyone. I just need to understand what happened from your perspective, the security perspective." "My perspective is I was watching the north entrance when the call came in. By the time I got to the lobby, you were already administering the inhaler." "How long did it take you to get there?" Hayes frowned. "Maybe 45 seconds. Lobby's on the other side of the building from the north entrance." "And what did you do when you arrived?" "Called it in, made sure the paramedics had clear access, kept the crowd back." Hayes set down his coffee cup. "Look, if you're trying to make me feel like shit for not being faster, I'm not. I'm trying to figure out how the system failed." "Because it did fail, Hayes. A girl almost died, and the people whose job is to respond to emergencies weren't in position to respond." Hayes stared at him for a long moment. Then he leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. You want to know why the system failed? I'll tell you. We've got 2 security officers on lobby duty during business hours. 2. For a building that holds 4,000 people, our job is to check badges, watch for threats, and call 911 if something goes wrong. We're not trained for medical emergencies. Hell, most of us aren't even certified in CPR anymore. The company cut that training 3 years ago to save money. They cut medical training? Said it was redundant. Building has a clinic on 7, we've got first aid kits on every floor, and paramedics can get here in under 5 minutes. Why spend money training security when professionals are so close? Hayes' laugh was bitter. Except when someone actually needs help, 5 minutes is forever. Ethan thought about the protocol handbook, the 17 steps, the authorizations and documentation requirements. What would you change if you could redesign how security handles emergencies? Hayes didn't hesitate. Mandatory medical training for everyone on staff. Not just CPR, actual emergency response. How to recognize the difference between a panic attack and a heart attack. How to use an AED. How to stop bleeding. And I'd put first aid stations at ground level, not 8 feet up where half the building can't reach them. What else? I'd change the culture. Hayes picked up his coffee again, swirled the dregs. Right now, everyone's afraid of liability. Afraid of doing the wrong thing and getting sued or fired. So they do nothing and call it protocol. You want people to actually help each other? You've got to make helping safer than not helping. Ethan pulled out his phone and started typing notes. Would you be willing to help me put together a proposal? Real-world security perspective, not corporate theory. Hayes studied him. You're serious about this? Yeah. Even though half the building thinks you're only here because Sinclair forced the issue? Especially because of that. Hayes grinned, sudden and genuine. All right, I'm in. But you're buying the coffee next time because this shit is undrinkable. Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan talked to everyone he could find. Maintenance workers who knew which stairwells were blocked and which exits stuck. Janitorial staff who saw the building at night when all the polished surfaces revealed their flaws. Administrative assistants who'd witnessed medical emergencies and had no idea what to do besides dial 911 and hope. He talked to Brenda Williams, a facilities manager on the 12th floor, who'd watched a colleague have a seizure during a meeting and spent 15 minutes arguing with building security about whether they were allowed to move her. They kept saying we couldn't touch her without authorization, Brenda told him, anger still fresh in her voice. Like she was a piece of equipment instead of a person. By the time the paramedics arrived, she'd bitten through her tongue and was bleeding all over the conference room carpet. You know what Voss's office sent us afterward? A memo about proper incident reporting procedures. Ethan talked to David Chen, a 30-year-old accountant who'd had a heart attack in the lobby 6 months before Maya's incident. David had survived, barely, because a UPS driver happened to know CPR and started compressions while everyone else stood around filming it on their phones. The worst part wasn't the pain, David said. It was looking up at all those faces and seeing curiosity instead of concern. Like I was entertainment. The UPS guy, I don't even know his name, he kept telling me to hang on, kept talking to me like I was a person instead of a problem. Security tried to pull him off twice because he didn't have building access. Ethan added every story to his database, every failure point, every moment where the system prioritized procedure over people. The pattern was unmistakable. Voss Meridian had built a culture where inaction was rewarded and action was punished, where following rules mattered more than saving lives. On a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks into his audit, Ethan was reviewing incident reports in his office when someone knocked on the doorframe. He looked up expecting Jennifer from HR or maybe Nguyen with another stack of paperwork. It was Daniel Voss. Ethan had been avoiding him, not hard in a building this size, but here he was, filling the doorway in a suit that probably cost what Ethan used to make in a month. His expression was carefully neutral, the kind of blank corporate face that revealed nothing. Mr. Cole, do you have a minute? It wasn't really a question. Ethan closed his laptop. Sure. Voss stepped inside and shut the door. He didn't sit down. I wanted to talk to you about the direction of your audit. Okay. I've been getting reports that you're interviewing staff members about past incidents, creating what amounts to a complaints database about building security and management practices. I'm documenting safety failures so we can fix them. That's one way to frame it. Voss's tone was still neutral, but his eyes were cold. Another way is that you're collecting ammunition to make this company look negligent, talking to people who are understandably emotional about traumatic experiences and recording their grievances as if they're objective facts. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Every person I've talked to has a story about how our current protocols failed them. Those aren't grievances, they're data points. Data points that could be used against us in litigation. Do you understand the liability implications of what you're doing? Do you understand the liability implications of people dying because we're too afraid to help them? Voss's jaw tightened. I understand that you're not a lawyer, Mr. Cole, and you're not a safety consultant or an emergency management professional. You're an electrician who happened to be in the right place at the right time and is now operating under the mistaken impression that one good deed makes you qualified to redesign corporate policy. Is that what you came here to say? I came here to remind you that this company has functioned successfully for 15 years using protocols designed by actual professionals. Protocols that balance safety with legal protection, that account for real-world constraints instead of idealistic fantasies about everyone being a hero. Voss stepped closer to the desk. You may have Richard Sinclair's backing, but he's one board member among 7. And the other 6 are getting very concerned about the liability exposure your little crusade is creating. Ethan stood up. They were roughly the same height, but Voss had the posture of someone used to being obeyed. Ethan had the posture of someone used to not giving a damn. Here's what I understand, Ethan said. A 16-year-old girl almost died in your lobby while 200 people watched. Security protocols prevented trained staff from helping her. Building policies prioritized legal protection over human life. And the only reason she survived is because someone broke your rules. So yeah, I'm documenting every way this system is broken. Because if we don't fix it, someone else is going to die. And when they do, those liability concerns you're so worried about, they're going to look real small compared to the wrongful death lawsuit. Voss stared at him. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but at least I'm trying to fix something instead of protecting it. You think you're different from everyone else in this building. Better, somehow. More moral. Voss's smile was thin. But you're not. You're just new. Give it 6 months and you'll be just like the rest of us. Worried about your paycheck, your benefits, your pension. Following the rules because that's how you keep your job. The system doesn't change, Cole. It changes you. He left before Ethan could respond. Ethan sat back down and stared at the closed door for a long time. Then he opened his laptop and kept working. That evening, he picked up Lucas from Mrs. Chen's and they walked to the corner store for milk and bread and the cereal Lucas liked that was basically candy with vitamins added. On the way home, Lucas was quiet, which was unusual enough that Ethan noticed. You okay, buddy? Lucas shrugged. Tyler said his dad says you're going to get fired. Ethan stopped walking. He said what? Tyler's dad works in your building, in accounting or something. He told Tyler's mom that the guy who saved that girl is causing problems and probably won't last. Lucas looked up at Ethan, worried. Are you going to get fired? Ethan crouched down so they were eye level. I don't know, maybe. Some people don't like the changes I'm trying to make. Why not? Because change is scary. It means admitting you were doing things wrong before. Lucas considered this, but if the old way was wrong, shouldn't they want to fix it? You'd think so. That's dumb. Ethan smiled despite everything. Yeah, it kind of is. They walked the rest of the way home in silence. After dinner, spaghetti, as promised, with the sauce from a jar that Lucas insisted tasted better than the homemade kind. Ethan helped with homework, while his phone buzzed with emails he ignored. At 8:30, he tucked Lucas into bed and read him 2 chapters from the book they were working through, some fantasy thing about kids who found a magic door in their school basement. Dad? Lucas said as Ethan was turning off the light. Yeah? Even if you do get fired, you did the right thing, saving that girl. Something warm and painful twisted in Ethan's chest. Thanks, buddy. And if Tyler's dad says mean stuff again, I'm going to tell him his tie looks stupid. Ethan laughed. Maybe don't do that. Why not? His tie does look stupid. It's got little golf clubs on it. Still, probably not worth starting a fight over. Lucas yawned. Okay. Love you. Love you too. Ethan closed the door and stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to Lucas settle into sleep. Then he went to the kitchen table and opened his laptop. Nguyen had sent him an email an hour ago. Subject line, We need to talk. He opened it. Cole. Voss filed a formal complaint with the board about your audit methodology. Claims you're creating a hostile work environment and exposing the company to unnecessary legal risk. Board meeting is scheduled for Monday. You'll need to present your preliminary findings and defend your approach. I suggest you have something solid. Again, Ethan checked the calendar. Monday was 4 days away. He'd been planning to use the full 6 weeks before presenting anything, but apparently Voss had decided to accelerate the timeline. He pulled up his spreadsheet. 3 weeks of interviews, incident reports, safety violations documented. It was comprehensive, but not finished. The recommendations section was barely started. Rough ideas, nothing concrete enough to present to a board that was looking for reasons to shut him down. Ethan worked until 2 in the morning, organizing data, building graphs, trying to turn 3 weeks of conversations into something that looked like professional analysis instead of a complaint letter. His eyes burned and his back ached from the cheap kitchen chair, and he kept thinking about what Voss had said. The system doesn't change. It changes you. When he finally closed the laptop, he was too wired to sleep. He walked to Lucas's room and stood in the doorway, watching his son breathe in the darkness. 8 years old, still young enough to believe that doing the right thing mattered, that people in charge would listen to reason, that the world made sense. Ethan wanted to keep that innocence alive as long as possible, but he also knew that the best way to teach Lucas about integrity wasn't through speeches or lessons. It was through example, through making hard choices and standing by them even when it cost something. He went back to the kitchen and made coffee even though it was 2 in the morning, and he opened his laptop again and kept working. Friday passed in a blur of data analysis and presentation building. Ethan skipped lunch, skipped dinner, ran on coffee and adrenaline and the stubborn belief that if he just worked hard enough, made the argument clear enough, someone would listen. Saturday he took Lucas to the park because he'd promised, and he pushed his son on the swings and tried not to think about Monday. But Lucas noticed anyway, the way kids always do. "You're worried about the meeting," Lucas said from the swing. "A little. What happens if they say no?" "Then I probably lose the job. And we go back to how things were before?" Ethan caught the swing, stopped its momentum. "Would that be so bad?" Lucas thought about it. "I liked before. You were home more, but you seem like you care about this job more, even though it makes you stressed." "I do care about it." "Then you should fight for it." Ethan looked at his son, 8 years old, gap-toothed, wearing a superhero t-shirt that was 2 sizes too small because he was growing faster than Ethan could keep up with. When had Lucas gotten so wise? "You're right," Ethan said. "I should." Sunday he rehearsed his presentation 17 times, timing it, adjusting slides, anticipating questions. Nguyen called him at 7 p.m. "You ready for tomorrow?" she asked. "As ready as I'm going to be. Voss is going to come at you hard. He spent the last week building support among the other board members, framing you as a liability. You need to be prepared for that." "What do you suggest?" "Don't get defensive. Don't make it personal. Stick to the data and make the business case, not the moral one. These are investors, Cole. They care about risk and return. Show them that your changes reduce liability, improve workplace safety ratings, and protect the company from lawsuits. Save the speeches about doing the right thing for after they're already convinced." Ethan thought about the people he'd interviewed. Brenda Williams and David Chen and Maya Sinclair. Their stories weren't data points or business cases. They were lives that had been endangered by a system that valued protection over people. "I'll try," he said. "Trying isn't enough. You need to win them over. Because if you don't, Voss will shut this whole thing down and you'll be out of a job by Tuesday." She hung up before he could respond. Ethan stood in his kitchen holding his phone, listening to Lucas play video games in the other room, and tried to figure out how to turn 3 weeks of human stories into a PowerPoint presentation that would convince 7 investors to care about something besides their bottom line. He stayed up until midnight working on it. Then he went to bed and stared at the ceiling, running through arguments and counter-arguments, until exhaustion finally pulled him under. Monday morning arrived too fast. Ethan dropped Lucas at school, drove to the building, and took the elevator to the 21st floor where the executive boardroom was located. He'd never been up here before. The carpet was thicker, the art on the walls more expensive, the silence more oppressive. Nguyen met him outside the boardroom at 8:45. She was wearing a dark suit and an expression that suggested this was going to be worse than she'd implied on the phone. 7 board members, she said quietly. Voss, Sinclair, and 5 investors who care primarily about quarterly returns. You'll have 30 minutes to present. Then they'll ask questions. Stay calm, stay factual, and for the love of everything, don't lose your temper. I won't. Yes, you will. You get this look when you're angry, like you're about to flip a table. I've seen it twice now. Don't let them see it today. Nguyen? I'm serious, Cole. These people eat conflict for breakfast. If they sense weakness or emotion, they'll use it against you. The boardroom doors opened. A woman in her 60s gestured them inside. The room was designed